The Nebraska Huskers are Fullback University, and I'll fight you for it.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, gang, deep here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate it. And thank you to you everydayers for what you do and stopping by and getting this content. Mark Onweiler, if you would, please let them know about Birddogs.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by Birddogs. Now, Birddogs are the shorts that are designed to make you look good. They're stretch khaki shorts, fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg to give you a truly sculpted look. They do the exact same thing as those more expensive brands, but they fit way better. They're not made of that stiff, restricting cotton. They fix the issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches, so you get that slimmer fit that everybody wants without having to sacrifice movement. Or Birddogs uses anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all year long. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take the Birddogs off, I promise you. DP, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. I want to spend this episode of Locked On Huskers talking about the fullback position and Nebraska fans, you Husker fans. Look, I know that there are very few things that make you smile and glow like the thought and conversation taken to Fullback universe. And in that universe, Nebraska fans have experienced the coronation and the throne. They throw down the gauntlet and say that Nebraska is Fullback University. And yes, it goes back in time. And yes, it goes back to the heyday and it goes back to the greatest days. But most of the greatest moments in Nebraska football history are wrapped around and involving some prehistoric version of human football player with ridiculous granite shoulders and a great big gigantic head, thick neck, broad thighs, and the ability to withstand pressure and friction and inflict pain on the Ray Lewises and Miami Hurricanes of the world. And it's missed in the current edition of Nebraska football and the recent edition of Nebraska football. The current edition, they just made an offer to Connor Booth from Wahoo, and the 2025 Cavalier fullback, who's averaging 13 yards a carry here in the state, gives cause and pause for us to revisit and reconsider Nebraska football with an actual fullback. And that leads to several things in it. So over the course of this episode, we'll break down the need and requirement. Does it fit? Is it coachable? Is it sustainable in this day and age where not a lot of high schools have fullbacks? A lot of systems don't run it. And then does it apply in the Big Ten Conference? Will it work? Is the talent available? Is there enough quality and quantity of fullbacks available in the country? So we'll have that discussion, and then we'll get into some of the greats that are. When you talk about Nebraska football, who are the great fullbacks ever? And I'm not sure that there's a greatest ever. You can get to the Mount Rushmore, maybe, even then with some debate. But most of the names are familiar, and then it becomes, okay, preference. What did you get from it? Do you want the highlights? Do you want consistency? Do you want run production? Do you want blockability? What do you want? What identifies the fullback to you? And then through the course of that, you get to those that you believe are best. But Connor Booth is the thing that the straw that stirs the drink here, and that Nebraska and Matt Rhule, Marcus Satterfield have said, look, there's zero reason why this can't be a part of what we do. And to focus on that, then you have to you have to find talent. And you have to find talent. Not all fullbacks are built the same, nor do they play the same, and their responsibilities aren't the same. So what would it be in Marcus Satterfield's offense? What would it be? What would this fullback be? And is it some mesh, some combination of the traditional Nebraska blockhead fullback and the Mike Riley-ish H-back version that Riley, Callahan and company teetered with? And because you consider it day and age of spreading the offense and then having players who can multitask and do multiple things in your scheme. But today's Big Ten, look, Wisconsin and Iowa, there's certain programs where they load up the big dude, Purdue. They'll load up the big dude and just say, listen, I like the ability to challenge the defense at point of attack. And that extra blocker matters. But we have to be careful because we don't track blocking that way. Like identifying stats and greatest, best ever, blocking doesn't always come up when it comes to fullbacks, except for Nebraska, where you think of the guys who led the way for great runners. And if you look in front of all the great runners prior to 2000, there was some big dude up in front of them that got way less attention, less notoriety, but they had their moments. So for you, I'll ask you to ponder for a second what it is that you think the ideal fullback would be, and then place that into Nebraska's offense, and then look at Nebraska's roster and tell me if you see anybody that fits your mental description of the classic fullback or the traditional fullback or even the 2023 Nebraska fullback. Is there anybody on the roster that looks the part and can play the part, not only in the Satterfield scheme, but in the Big Ten Conference? Is there a fullback that's willing to go nose to nose with those nasty middle linebackers in the Big Ten Conference over the course of 4 quarters, over the course of 12 ball games? That's a lot. So in order to talk fullbacks, you go back in history, I'd say that rushing yards is still an identifier. Touchdowns is still an identifier. But it's not easy at all to come up with this list. There are names that we're familiar with. And I would say that if you set the standard with Corey Schlesinger, let's just start with Corey Schlesinger. And at 7 yards a carry over the course of his career, wow, that is a spectacular number, especially for fullback. I mean, if a running back has those numbers, we throw confetti and we invite them to New York to sit down and talk about a trophy. But for a fullback to do that, yeah, I mean, in limited carries, because if you're the lead blocker and the traffic cop, it's not your job to be the leading ball carrier. That doesn't happen. It didn't happen in Nebraska, and it doesn't happen often. But Schlesinger and his success, specifically the 94 season, that when you think of highlights and you think of big plays in Nebraska history, big offensive plays in Nebraska history, Corey Schlesinger is a name that pops up. So I think that is the standard bearer for how we're going to move around this. We'll throw it a break. When we come back, we'll get into the list. And there's brothers on the list. There's an icon on the list. There is another name that is tied to coaches. And then there's a guy who played in Miami and who, quite frankly, ran the ball as well as anybody ever did at the fullback position. We'll talk about those players when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Hey, gang, DP here. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate it. You everydayers and you folks that want to hang out. Again, we're talking about fullbacks and Fullback U. And I said, put up your dukes. I'll fight you for it. Because there is not – I think the only other schools that are in the conversation of Fullback University are those rivals and those blue bloods of college football. Notre Dame and the Bettises, there's a whole line of them. USC, so good that they changed college football and forced Paul Bear Bryant to change the way he recruited because Sam Cunningham embarrassed him on national TV on the Rose Bowl from the fullback position. They didn't have they had never seen anything like it. They hadn't coached anything against it. Ohio State and its fullbacks. Texas and the wishbone. And again, so good that it turned it fullbacks into tailbacks and won Heisman trophies. So those are some of those. But at Nebraska, again, if you use Corey Schlesinger as the standard, and a lot of people have talked about what would work currently in the Big Ten. Some of these folks transcend time. Joel Makovica is one of these, and he's another standard bearer for the Tom Osborne fullback. There were times when he would get double-digit carries. Also, when he goes over 100 yards, and that's just not that common. 600 yards over the course of the year, 600-plus yards in 97. When you go over 1,000 for your career at fullback position, you've done double-digit touchdowns as well. Yeah, you have that discussion. And an elite-level blocker. Size be damned. He threw himself into it. Great angle blocker, great hands, and there's a toughness. There's an actual toughness. But if you're talking about tough characters that played football at Nebraska, well, some call him coach. But when you talk about Hall of Fame caliber coaching careers, I like to say that coaches coach in a way that is connected to their style of play, their persona, who they were as players. And in 1962, 63, 64, Frank Solich, playing fullback for Nebraska, did some pretty exceptional things. Now, if you want to talk about, he had over 400 yards those 3 years, didn't have many touchdowns, but look, he played the old version of fullback to the point where he even threw. I think I want to say he had 6 TD passes in his career. So hey, no, he had 6. I think it was 6 passes. He had 1 for a touchdown. But think about it: undersized, but just tough. But a pretty good standard bearer for football at Nebraska at the fullback position. Here's another one that I find interesting. If I said to you Dick Davis, is that a name that resonates with Nebraska football fans? No. Well, the proper identification is Dr. Davis. He was the only fullback to gain 600 yards in 2 different seasons, 67, 68, to go plus 600 yards. He's the only one. You go, okay, we may have missed it, and out of respect. What if I said Tom Rathman and his 881 yards in 85 is the highest number ever for a Husker, and he still holds the yards per carry highest number for fullbacks, 7.5 yards per carry at the fullback position at Nebraska. 4 times over 100 yards rushing. Standards. Those are when you talk about it. I like to, again, I'm the DC kid, and I was watching from outside in, but a name that I knew of and connected with Nebraska was Andre Franklin. And in his career, 1,738 yards from a fullback position. And never the feature. Never the feature. Those are impressive numbers. If I said to you that, okay, there's a fullback at Nebraska who put up 500 yards rushing in a year at the fullback position, who then went on to the NFL and played defensive back, would you know who it was? Nick Aducci, back in 1950. If I said, there's a doctor Averaged 10 yards a carry in the year 2000. End up setting the Husker career record for touchdowns with 14 by a fullback. Judd Davies. This is what I loved about it, because it made me spin a little bit and go, wait a minute. How did I not know? Even in the current era of Nebraska football, the name Andy Janovich just makes people smile. You just smile, you feel good about it. Give credit to Mike Ratley for pulling him out of the darkness and recognizing. And then he averaged 6.3 yards a carry. We know the big plays, like we can think of the big plays, but you go, wow, man, he was consistent. And then if I said there was a fullback who ran for 690 yards, which was the fourth highest in Husker history, Jerry Brown is not a name that I've heard in Husker football talking circles. And we should do better about it. But that's why I take these journeys down. I have a player that I need to track, because it was a name that I was not familiar with. But then when you think of the era and the teams that he played on, so in the same backfield with Turner Gill, Mike Rozier, and Tom Rathman, there's another fullback who ran for 9 touchdowns and over 400 yards. Mark Shallon. And I just went, okay. Like we have to do better by giving these gentlemen, these fullbacks, their flowers. There's some great ones. You can go. I got 22 deep before I said, oh, I've gone too deep. I've gone too far. But that adds to my argument that, in fact, Nebraska is Fullback U. You can tell me if I missed anybody. Put them down in the comment sections. You can disagree if you like. I will give my top 4. I can't be wrong because it's my opinion. I cannot get this right. So it's full declaration. There's no way I'm wrong in my opinion, but there's 0 chance I'm going to get this right. But I'm going to give it a try when we come back to Locked On. Hey, gang, thank you once again for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Your Huskers every day. I appreciate you hanging out, and hopefully you've put your comments in the comment section. And again, I'm not mad about any of the comments. You can disagree, but tell me, put it in the comments, your Mount Rushmore, your 4. And it could be somebody that I did not name. You could, if you say it's the other Makovic, like, okay. That's not a bad thing. But I would think that Frank Solich goes to the list easily. Andre Franklin, just because he was the best rusher, and he's still, I'm not sure anybody wore neck roll as well as Andre Franklin. Like, I'm just not sure that anybody did. Rathman, because, and we have to be fair because it may be based on his professional success and growth. But, yeah, you would think that for what Rathman did. And then George Sauer, who, through all of the numbers, and then, again, the professional career and his place as a coach and a leader in the community, I don't think you're wrong in that. You could I had literally somebody ask me to do this list, and they mentioned Bill Olds, who played in the same backfield as Johnny Rodgers and Jeff Kinney. And they talk about his 100-yard rushing game against Texas A&M. And I just went, oh, now I got to go back and look at this, and it's legitimate. I mentioned, Dave Todd. There are so many fullbacks that if you're talking about quality of play and elevating the position, highlighting the position. Look, the pipeline thanks the Hogs, thanks, the electric company. Everybody has like the thing, but when it comes to fullbacks, if you're talking about it, yeah, you'll mention USC, you'll mention the Longhorns, Alabama, Notre Dame. But at the top of the list, I'll fight you for Nebraska's spot on top of the list as Fullback University. That'll be it for this one. Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. And we'll close with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.